In this lesson, we are looking at circulatory system exchange surfaces. So there's quite a lot here, but our main ones are explaining structural features and describing how the closed circulatory system actually works. All right, given that multicellular organisms have a capacity to differentiate cells into doing specialized jobs, they take advantage of this by building really complex systems to do really complex jobs, which makes sense. Transporting nutrients, gases, waste, and all that stuff around the body is really vital to supplying every single cell type, with what they need. So they might need oxygen, they might need water, all those things. Now the circulatory system does this. We're talking blood vessels, and the heart, and it's also called the cardiovascular system. Now there are different types of systems in different organisms. There are closed systems, so it's like a tubing system, like, think of a hose or pipes, and it's got a pump. It's one directional, multiple chambers in that heart, which is the pump, to stop oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing. Or they're actually open systems. So there's no real blood vessels as we know it. The blood is kind of a bit different to what we know. It's mainly water, and it moves away from the pump and sort of perfuses into all the surrounding tissue. So very different to, say, the mammalian ones. We've got a closed system here and an open system here in the grasshopper. Our focus is the mammalian one, which is going to be a closed system. So this is obviously incredibly complex, so we'll boil it down to its main components, which are the heart, the blood, and all the kinds of vessels that we've got here. Now the mammalian heart has what's known as double circulation, right? The heart pumps blood to the lungs, and then the blood returns that pumped blood to the heart. The blood returns to the heart so the heart can pump it around to the rest of the body, and then it comes back and goes back to the lungs, picks up more oxygen, and round it goes. The heart has 4 chambers, and it's separated to pump, and so that these kinds of bloods don't actually mix, right? The deoxygenated versus the oxygenated. And you can see here at the top here, we have the atrium and the atrium here, and then at the bottom we have 2 ventricles. So the reason this is the left side here is because we are thinking about it from if you are looking front on to a person there. In the heart, we can see really simplistic diagrams here, and relatively simplistic diagrams of the closed system, but we do have quite a lot going on here. So in the heart there are valves to stop backflow. Right? It can only go in one direction, and the major blood vessels allow for lots of blood to exit at once, and they're quite wide. So the heart works like a big, it is a big muscle basically, and it's pumping blood to where it needs to be. The blood represented in these pictures is red and blue is obviously representing deoxygenated blood, and it is coming into the heart from the body where it's deposited all of its oxygen, and the red stuff is coming back from the lungs and needs to be pumped out back to the rest of the body. So where it's pumped throughout the rest of the body, it is obviously depositing oxygen and then picking up carbon dioxide to come back to the heart to be pumped to the lungs to get rid of that oxygen, the carbon dioxide, because it is a waste product. Now, blood itself is super complex, right? It's not just a watery substance. It's got a lot of components in it. Now, the plasma component here, it's the liquid component. It allows for all the other components to flow. It's dissolving nutrients, it's dissolving waste, and that need to be delivered in and out of where they need to go. The red blood cells here, and we've got the red blood cell layer on the bottom there, they're containing hemoglobin, which is a protein that carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. It picks it up in the lungs, picks up the oxygen in the lungs, takes it away to all the cells in the tissues, and it brings back the CO2 to deposit as the waste. We've got the white blood cells here, and you can see there's a very thin layer there. And the white blood cells have an immune response, which we'll learn a bit about more later. And then we have these platelets here, which help in clotting and closing up wounds. Now, if we're talking about our blood vessels, we have 3 main types we need to think about: the arteries, the capillaries, and the veins. And you can see them once again depicted in blue and red. These aren't their colors, right? Veins appear blue because the skin absorbs red light better than blue. So the blue is then reflected back to us, which is what our eyes see. But if you can see the difference here, this is oxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood is a little bit darker, but it's not blue. Arteries are the first one we're going to talk about, and they transport blood away from the heart. There's no exception to that. Arteries always move away from the heart. Most of the time, blood in arteries is oxygenated. However, the exception to that is if it's going away from the heart and going to the lungs so it can pick up more oxygen. That's the only time it is different, and that's going through the pulmonary artery. Now, every organ and tissue in the body is serviced by more than one artery, including the heart itself, right? The heart is a muscle. It needs to actually have arteries go and take blood to it. So the blood in arteries is moving at a really high pressure. So the walls of the arteries have to be really thick to maintain that pressure, and they must be pretty muscly. They have to be tough, strong, and elastic so they can withstand changes in blood pressure. Now, the artery in this picture is this one here. It's wide, it's got a really muscly outer exterior there, and in the lumen, in the center bit, you can see where blood would be flowing. Veins, on the other hand, are moving towards the heart. They return blood to the heart and usually are filled with deoxygenated blood, except when they're returning from the lungs to the heart. That's that one exception again, because if they're coming back from the lungs, they've already picked up the oxygen they need, and then they're going to be pumped out to the rest of the body via the arteries. Now, these ones work at much lower pressure, so the walls don't need to be quite as thick. They have fewer muscle and elastin fibers. They're a bit floppier. They're not as flexible, and they can dilate really, really wide, much wider than an artery, and they can hold up to 80% of the total volume of the blood, and this usually decreases during exercise when the blood is pumping all the blood, when the heart is pumping all the blood away with the arteries. Now, gravity and skeletal muscles are relied upon to actually move the blood through the veins, since they don't have muscly walls around them. So skeletal muscle squeezes that blood incidentally, so movement helps circulation, like walking, fidgeting, whatever it is. Valves exist here, and you can see here there's a valve. It exists due to stopping backflow, right? We don't want the backflow. We want it all to go in one direction so we can go back to the heart, pick up oxygen in the lungs, and then go back around. So we don't want backflow at all. And there's little pocket-shaped valves have kind of a 3-cup-shaped flaps of tissue. And when they open, the flaps push to the side of the lumen, and when it's closed, no blood can go back through. Again, the vein is this floppy one here. It does have thick walls, but they're not made of muscle. Now, here are our capillaries. These are our last kind of blood vessels. They're very, very small, and arteries branch into really small pathways. Think about a really large river branching into smaller creeks, and these turn into arterioles. They then turn into capillaries, and the capillaries form this giant network, branch, and then rejoin each other to repeatedly, so they can go back to every single tiny little cell, right? Every cell in the body needs to be serviced by a capillary. The only exception to that are the lenses in the eye and the cornea, because they need to be transparent. So capillaries are really small intermediaries, essentially, between arteries and veins, where the nutrients, the oxygen, whatever else it is, gets actually delivered to the cells, and the waste products are then picked up. They're really, really tiny, and they usually can only fit one blood cell through at any given time. So we're talking really thin walls here, 1 cell thick, and they will only allow 1 blood cell to go through the lumen at any given time. Now, the structure of the capillaries allows for really efficient gas exchange, both oxygen and carbon dioxide. They have super thin walls that are only 1 cell thick, which means they're really easily permeable, so the gases can enter and exit. And when we think about this, if the red blood cell is carrying oxygen, it needs to diffuse through the wall of this capillary and then into the cells. And if it's carbon dioxide, it needs to still diffuse through the cell walls on both sides of this cell, and then, not cell wall, cell membrane, and then go into the alveoli and the lungs, right? Now, because there are so many capillaries, they end up having a really huge surface area, which we know really allows for more nutrient exchange in lots of different places in the body. Blood flows really slowly through them because they're only really letting 1 cell through at a time. It's kind of single file, and it gives them time to offload and pick up gases where they need it. And body cells are no more than 0.5 millimeter away from a capillary at any given time. So capillaries are everywhere, and they are really needed to easily distribute what they need to every single cell in the body. So this is what we're covering. There's a lot in that. So please take notes, draw some diagrams, whatever you need to do.